Dwarf French beans. Now, I haven't grown them for a couple of years because I've grown my broad beans. So, as I say, I've decided not to do my broad beans. I'm growing these French beans, and everyone in the house eats them. And I use them in everything from stir fries to vegetable curries to just having them simply steamed. And I love a green bean salad with basil, balsamic, and parmesan. So they were definitely get put back on my list for growing this summer. However, they are considered a tender crop, and the advice is not to sow them even indoors until the end of April, and only plant out when all risk of frost is past. So, needless to say, I've been covering my plants as they germinated indoors with me. They didn't germinate outside at all. They were indoors and they only got put outside into the polytunnel a week ago. Last Tuesday they got put out into the polytunnel, but I've been covering them every night with fleece and waking up in the morning and praying that there had been a frost to keep everything looking good for you. So if you're patient, please be so and wait another few weeks before sowing and growing on French beans yourself. If you're growing them at home outdoors, you could probably start them off in the next week or so indoors, get them germinated, and then set them outside every day, but always bring them in at night time because the risk of frost has not passed yet. The hawthorn hedge is starting to bud up, but it's not flowered. So once the hawthorn, or the May tree as it's known as, has blossomed, we know that the risk of frost has passed. But here in Ayrshire, it's not passed yet. So, but once we get them sown and growing the way that they are on in the fourth image here, their growing needs are really simple. They just need sun, a wee bit of shelter, and moisture. I always grow them in pots because they don't like clay soil. So if you have soil like mine, clay, grow them in pots for definite. It's definitely the safest way to go. So here in the pictures, I've sown two varieties, Rockencore and Berlotto, into seed sections. And the last image on the right here is the young plants that were 18 days old in this picture here. So I made a structure out of canes tied with string at the top to make a wigwam shape for the beans to be supported by. But these are dwarf beans and they're fairly upright, and when they're planted relatively close to one another, they kind of support one another. They should be able to support themselves. But my grand plan is to grow sweet peas, flowering sweet peas on this structure also. So I wanted some canes with height to grow my sweet peas up. So the first two images are of my cane wigwam. Then the third image is of the individual young plant being placed and planted beside a cane. As you can see, the root ball, there's not that many white roots in there, but they're doing fine. They've actually started to put on there's new leaves developing already. So they got potted in the polytunnel into this pot last Tuesday, and they're doing fine actually. But as I say, they're getting fleeced every night. So this pot is 40 centimetres diameter, 40 centimetres tall. The roots of, you probably would get away with a shallower pot, maybe about 30 centimetres. But you need to make sure it's wide enough as well. But because I know I'm going to plant sweet peas in here and the wigwam top is going to become heavier as the weeks progress, I wanted to have a decent sized pot for weight and balance at the bottom. So these beans should be ready for harvesting from around 10 weeks from sowing. And my plan is to sow maybe 7 to 8 seeds every 3 weeks. And all things being well, I should be harvesting beans into the early autumn by having fresh beans being sown the whole time. Growing beans directly into the soil, you wouldn't really need to feed the plants, but since we're growing in pots, even if you use a good quality compost, its nutrients will have been exhausted by around about week 6. That's what it normally says on the bag of compost. After this time, a fortnightly feed will be needed for your French beans. Use a plant food fertiliser that is high in potassium. Something like tomato food would be ideal. So if you're growing tomatoes, you'll be able to use the same plant food for both of these vegetables. I'll show you the Tomerai in a wee minute. Definitely start feeding once the first flowers appear, if that is before the 6 weeks of the compost of being planted into fresh compost. Keep picking the pods as soon as they're produced, and this will encourage the plant to keep on making some more. But after around 4 weeks of harvesting, the plant will be exhausted. It won't keep on making beans all summer long. But if you're doing a bit of sowing every few weeks, you'll soon have another pot of plant coming behind, ready to be harvested. French beans, like the compost, to be always kept damp. So check daily and stick your finger in, give it a good poke down, a good 5 centimetres into the compost, making sure that it's always damp. If it's less drier than damp, then the plants need watered. How about that? With beans, I would say err on the damper side of damp. Don't think, oh, it's fine. Give them a wee drink, give them a good drink of water, and then let them dry out a little bit more, and then return a couple of days, give them another good drink.